So while looking for a location in here for my ARB air lockers, I did consider the panels that they have for this area in a couple of aftermarket manufacturers, and even using the stock locker switches, but I do like the look of the ARB. I wasn't a fan of all the clunky switches and things that you could buy for different locations of the truck, and maybe an S-Pod later would be ideal. But for the time being, I wanted to do something very unique. I wanted the locker functionality to be around the shift area, a four-wheel drive, you got your, your automatic shifter, and I wanted that locker feel down here so that everything is right at my fingertips. So what I'm going to do is show you how to take apart this area real quick, and some of the ideas I have. Might be a neat idea for somebody to want something looking a little more OEM, and to give you an idea how you can modify your truck without buying expensive switch systems. Alright, so we're going to start with something as simple. They made this Jeep really accessible. I'm excited to do this video because I think it's going to be really cool, but if you can get your finger behind here, just pull, you can unclip this dash panel ever so gently, and then slip that out and unconnect this and slip that off to the side. And then after the screws removed, just gently pull from the center in the corners. That'll pop out. Start disconnecting all of your harnesses. And those two already pulled out, and just start working your way down. And eventually you will get this panel. Something else I wanted to address in here is that you have a couple of different wires that do different things, so just make sure you remember where they're laid out. I think the really unique thing about this is that it's not that it's so high tech, but that it's old tech. So these plugs right here, you can see those, they look like the old style USB plugs. And that's interesting because if this is going into your radio, you can buy an adapter for this and then run, let's see if I can focus this a little better. There we go. You can run an adapter to that and then have maybe something controlled from this aux port, either up inside your dash up here or in your glove compartment. Gives you a couple options to pull that out of there, and you can also modify that area. This is powering my amplifier by a turn on switch from the cigarette lighter. Okay, in this next video we have the part that we removed from the truck, and the cigarette lighter location is really kind of nice. It's pointed towards the driver, has this neat indent. I think it looks real clean, and I'm going to pop this out. And we're going to install two ARB air locker switches right here. Alright, so I've got it pretty much taped off how I want it to cut. I decided with a little bit of air on caution so I can remove a little more material rather than have to get rid of it. So I am going to go ahead and start cutting now. You can use what feels comfortable. I'm using a pretty aggressive blade on here, but do what works for you. And this is going real slow, so we're just going to go a little bit at a time. All right, there you go. Not too bad. I gotta adjust them a little bit, but they look to be pretty centered in there. All right, you guys, there's the finished product. I think it looks pretty good. There's a lot of careful cutting, and spent a little extra time on it, and it looks pretty OEM. So the ARB compressor switch right now is there because I don't have the front locker switch yet, and that will be my locker selection when I go ahead and put the diffs in. I got Dana 44s front and rear in my Gladiator, and those will be my front and rear locker switches. Right there, easy to access, be lit up, all wired in, and looking pretty OEM. Pretty happy with how it turned out. All right, now that we've got the switches all installed, I wanted to cover wiring them real quick. So in the ARB manual, we have switch 1 and 2 and an isolator switch. What I've gone and done is I've used switch 1 and 2, these two, and then for the isolator switch, which is just a way to turn on the air pump, I am using a fuse at the 2 wires that turn the pump on. These are for illumination and grounds. These 2 wires are the ones that close the circuit, and I am fusing them at 20 amps. And just using this in place of a switch, because what I'm going to do is once these are wired, the compressor is fully on. When I go to flip one of these switches in this configuration, I have rear locker and front locker. These 2 will kick on the compressor because I'm essentially just shorting it out, but instead of shorting it out with a wire jumper, I'm using 20 amp fuse to maintain some safety in there. And then this would be normally a third switch, but because of my configuration on this, I'm just going to have the front and rear lockers. And then down here, as you follow, this is the mini harness. This is going to go into the harness that comes out of from under the hood, and this plugs in and gives you all the switch locations. And then these are installed with diodes here to protect the circuits from reversing polarity. Very nice little feature. And the blue one is going to go to the cigarette lighter's illumination, where it was. Remember that we replaced the cigarette lighter, so I've got all the wiring I need right here. This is going to go to the illumination on the cigarette lighter, and this is going to go to the power on the cigarette lighter. So now under the hood, I have fused circuits that are going to be soldered in to where the wiring was for my lighter plug. And I have my ARB switches located right here, and they are the front and rear locker. I have to get the other switch cover to replace that compressor switch, but they are the same switch. I just am changing the cover to a front locker switch. All right, we're inside the truck wiring up the 2 ARB air lockers, and I talked a little bit about the wiring already on this side, and so I'm moving on to some light on here. Moving on to the wiring inside. So these 2 wires that we talked about needed power and illumination. This is the wire that was coming off of the cigarette lighter plug. It had illumination on it. There was 2 circuits on this and a ground, so 3 wires total. So your ground and your illumination and your power. So now in the panel under the hood where we have all of our fuses, I now have a fused circuit for my lockers. They run into the locker switches, and then the ARB air compressor is also fused internally, and we're going to tuck this behind the dash, but we should never have to deal with this because since it's just a little extra safety feature, adding that 20 amp fuse to complete the circuit, that will allow me to turn each locker on independently, and then the ARB compressor will come on no matter what because of the way it's wired with that fuse in there. This, I used some heat shrink on there, and we have all of our connections made, and it's nice and clean. So when we tuck this behind the dash, it'll be all protected and waterproof. And then this blue wire that you see coming out of here is also a connection made at the lighter plug that powers the amplifier that's under my dash. I have a SCAR 400 watt amplifier under there to keep it up and protected. Under the dash there, that's in another review on Gladiator forum that I installed, and the wiring is fairly straightforward in here. This was incredibly simple. It was pretty much just 2 wires, and you're just utilizing the already in place circuit of the lighter plug that we took out to install these switches. I mean, it looks and performs like factory. So let's go ahead and get this buttoned up, and I'll show you how it looks once it's cleaned up. So if you guys ever wondered how I maybe or anybody wires a truck through the firewall, the trick is to use one of these tools that are kind of a reaching tool, has a grabber on the end with a spring, and you just start feeding it up through the hole back here, and then if you're lucky it fishes, and I wrap a ton of wire around that to get it as smooth as possible so that it pulls through the hole in the grommet. And what I'm looking at up here, hopefully it'll allow me to brighten it up. I guess it's not going to. Let me get a flashlight. Alright, so if you can see up in here, there is a grommet, rubber grommet, just above floor mat. There's the side of the wall. You can pop this whole panel out here, this kick panel, sorry, not the wall, but what I have up here is I have a 4-gauge power wire coming out of there. I have a couple of switch, that black one's a switch wire. And now this wire loop right here is all the ARB switches. And they're all coming up from this rubber grommet. I just poked a hole in it with a knife. Just be very careful not to cut any wires up there, obviously, because you're going to ruin your vehicle. And then over here behind the wheel well, I just have the plastic pulled back. So I have my fender pulled, and it's just these two little plastic retainers right here that are the way to open it. You just peel it back, and then let me look up here. And then that auxiliary battery is right here, and you can just push that wire tool that I just showed you through a hole right there. It'll stick against that plastic box. You just reach up there and grab the plastic, or next to the box, you grab the wire tool and pull it down into the wheel well, and just wrap your tape right here, and then pull your wire up through there. I will put split loom on this and protect it from the heat and exhaust, but just wanted to show you that is probably the easiest way to get in there. It looks difficult, but after you've done it a couple times, it just takes seconds. Alright, so after I pulled the wire through the dash, after pulling it through the firewall, the wire's kind of hanging down here. I'm going to zip tie or clip that up into the existing wire harness. I pulled using my reacher tool. I used it to zip down into this area. Super easy. Just find the hole right there and then slide it down and it'll pop out. So then you can see it right there. And bring it back up, and the wire comes up through here, and then I've got my cable for my air lockers. So there's 3 wires and a ground on here. There's one for the isolator switch, which is also the air pump, and then there's a yellow and green or red and green, depending on how you wire it, that operate the locker switches. This is all included in the CDMA pump, and I'm about to show you my pump install, so more on that in a minute. But while I'm finishing this up, the wires come through bare, and it includes this Molex connector, and then you just push them in. There's little metal clips inside, and when you push them in, you'll hear them click, and then they hold in. So this does not have to go through the firewall. You don't put this thing on until the very end, and then once that's done, we'll just start connecting all these back together. I have to do it with 2 hands, obviously, because I'm holding a camera. And I will finish and button this up and then show you guys the pump install. All right, let's talk a little bit about the compressor. So if you remove your engine cover, which has some sound deadening in it, so it kind of helps with the known ticking that these cars, these trucks have in this 3.6 liter. I don't notice a big difference with it off or on, so I left it off. It allows you to have a couple of mounting locations around the engine for other bolts. Then I took a flange, there's a bracket here that cover slips into and holds it all down, and then bolts here. I removed the 2 bolts, and then I removed the 10mm bolts that were back here on that bracket, and it gave the engine a kind of a nice clean look. I like the look of the intake plenum. I'm an engine builder, and I just think it looks more natural to have the engine showing all of its components. And there's certainly some things you could clean up here, but I like it as a Jeep, that it just looks, like this is your power plant. This is where the Jeep does its work. So this funny thing is about this, what I think is really neat, is that this location offers you bolt holes that are perfectly spaced for the compressor mount locations for the CDMA compressor. This is the larger one. It's like 260, 290, depending on where you buy it. And it has all of the wiring coming out to this side. It's all integrated. It has the two locker connectors that come with this compressor already pre-wired in. You don't have to use them, but they're there. And then this is the switch I was telling you about. When the compressor reaches its 100 psi or whatever they have the switch set to, it kicks the compressor off, so it's not being run 100%. If I want to run the compressor while I have the chuck installed and I'm using the tire fill kit, which I have for this, I can connect my tire fill hose here, and I got almost 20 feet of length that I can run right down either side of the truck and air up tires. I can air up bikes, I can air up whatever I want with it. And then on the other side here you have the connections for your lockers. So I don't have my second locker yet because I'm waiting to see if 35 spline shafts come out for the Dana 44 in our truck, and if they don't, I'm probably going to wait a little while and just stay with the 488s and limited slip diff, and then I'll go to another locker here later. But I'll have 2 locker switches in the truck for the front and rear lockers right here. This is the front locker right now. The chuck is, as you can see, located there, and it still sits well below the hood line. As I come down here, it doesn't rub anywhere. Everything looks to fit well, especially with the bump in our hoods. Our stock hoods actually have plenty of room down here. And then the wiring comes around the battery, and I have it set up so that I have my 40 amp ARB fuse right here. So the wiring circles around this direction here, and it grounds here, and the power is supplied here, right here. So everything's well integrated. I like how the fit and finish turned out. It's a very simple wiring system. The directions give you really great directions on that. Really doesn't really need a install video for that. It's just a lot of time fill for the for the YouTube guys. I'd rather just get to the point. So the other thing is the wire comes off of a harness, and that there's the ARB compressor runs off this relay for 40 amps. So it's pulling like 20 amps, but this is plenty beefy enough to handle the load. And then that little wire coming off there then goes into the harness I just showed you behind the dash. So everything's integrated into the Jeep now. I just got to run my air lines to my diff, and then the other airline when I get the other locker, just so that I can have everything kind of at my fingertips when it's all integrated. It gives you a couple different options. Hopefully this gave you some ideas. I think that this is probably one of the best locations that you could have the ARB be, or ARB pump sit at. Everything is right here to be serviced. It looks like Jeep left you a bracket to mount it right there. It stays cooler because you have air blowing over it the entire time the truck's on. The filter's up high. Your filter media needs to be up as high as possible, and that location I think is just, I mean, I think I foresee this maybe being copied a lot. I hope that you guys really take advantage of this find. All right, so that wraps up everything for the ARB compressor install. We talked about the wiring in the vehicle, how to get it through the firewall, the switch location, The switches themselves, kind of a little bit of work to get them integrated to make them look OEM. But I really like that location. It's been kind of working on me a little while how I was going to do the install, but I love having both rocker switches at my fingertips next to the shifter. And then finally the compressor install, that was pretty quick, but there's plenty of compressor install videos if you were worried about the wiring. The manual covers it all. The location here though, I believe, is probably, I think, the one to be copied. Usually there's like that one good deal where everything just meshes, and it was Jeep's engineering, a little bit of test fitting around the truck one day. Took me a couple hours to try different things, and I just ended up deciding on this after I removed the engine cover. The location is up high. It's out of the dirt and the mud. It stays cooler because the fan's blowing on it. This is just the best location for your compressor, hands down. And then the chuck here, if you're using a chuck, go ahead and throw on a 90-degree elbow from a hardware store, a couple of dollars. And then your orange hose, get the tire filled, plug it in here. You can fill your tires with this thing. You can use it to run lockers if you're not a Rubicon, or if you're upgrading your Rubicon into ARBs. This is also like the prime location for it. I can't stress that enough, that the bolt's literally on the two corners lined up, bolted in, no fabrication needed, and the mount was already right there. You can see it under the cover because it's the way the cover sits on the engine. It just looked like a perfect location for a compressor. I don't know if Jeep, the enthusiasts helped build this thing, and there were a lot of inputs from people all over the community when the next generation of Jeeps were built. So that about sums up the compressor and the switch install. My next series will be installing the lockers and connecting the air hoses, and that is going to be quite a series because we have to get inside the diffs. And doing 488 gears, ARB air lockers. The rear diff, I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to do a 35 spline shaft. It might be the first one to do it if I can find support for that, and then do a 35 spline ARB in the rear. Right now I'm kind of waiting on that to see how that pans out, and then maybe just do a Dana 60 if that's the route I'm going to go. So right now I just have a limited slip diff in the rear, 48 gears, but that's for a whole other video. So click like, subscribe, follow me. I like making this content. I like having the support. I like getting your guys' ideas. Comment what you'd like to see the next install be, and it matters what you guys think. Otherwise, I'm just kind of wasting my time or wasting my breath on some of these installs. But can't recommend this location and this ARB pump enough. This is the CDMA, the larger air compressor, and it is a perfect fit for your JL Wrangler or your Gladiator. Thanks guys, appreciate you.